Welcome to Surround Presents, the show where we explore everything the Surround Podcast Network has to offer. On this episode, we're showcasing Cool Hunting's Design Tangents podcast. Design Tangents is hosted by the Cool Hunting founders, Evan Orenston and Josh Rubin, and it takes listeners on a journey into the minds of artists, designers, musicians, tech pioneers, visionaries. It's a podcast that explores the creative processes and inspirations that drive design change makers and offers a behind-the-scenes insight into the careers, challenges, and philosophies of creators everywhere. And on this episode, Josh and Evan spoke with Teo Yang, one of South Korea's most interesting designers, whose studio focuses on translating Korean traditional heritage into a modern design language. I think you're really going to enjoy this.
I think Koreans do feel this great need to reclaim what's ours and really understand what we had and really use tradition as a resource to build the future.
Welcome to Design Tangents, a podcast from Cool Hunting exploring the creative processes and inspirations that drive changemakers. I'm Josh Rubin.
And I'm Evan Orenston. You know, Josh and I have been spending a lot of time in Korea over the last few years, and we're so excited about the culture and pace of innovation there.
We organized and hosted our most recent Cool Hunting travel experience in South Korea earlier this year to bring our guests, our readers, our community into that country to experience it firsthand, because we wanted to share our passion for how artists and designers can reference the past and take it into a new direction and give it a new meaning. And that's really one of the dominant themes that we saw during our research of South Korea over a couple years. And Teo Yang is definitely one of the artists, one of the designers that we're incredibly inspired by.
He's an amazing guy. He's a multidisciplinary creative, truly. And he's someone who looks back at his native Korean culture and heritage, but he's blazing forward with a completely new vision of it. He grew up in Seoul, moved to Chicago, where he earned a degree in interior architecture from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and then to Pasadena, where he earned a degree in environmental design from the Art Center College of Design. He lived and worked abroad in Amsterdam and Berlin, and worked for studios including Marcel Wanders. He eventually moved back to Seoul, and today his entrepreneurial world includes his design studio, a furniture and accessories company, a skincare brand, a line of fragrances, and just to round it off, during the pandemic, he started writing science fiction, and he's actually written and published several books.
One of the most special moments during our Cool Hunting Korea trip was when Teo welcomed us into his home. Now, he doesn't live in a new modern building. When he was looking for a place to purchase, he was really drawn to one of Seoul's remaining traditional neighborhoods, or bukchons. He fell in love with a traditional Korean townhouse, a hanok, from 1917 that he has totally restored and in some parts completely reimagined, creating a fresh and vibrant point of view that looks forward and honors the past.
Teo recently passed through New York City, and we were so grateful that he made time to sit down and talk with us in the studio. Teo, when I think of you, I think somewhat similar to how people might know about Cool Hunting. If you know about Cool Hunting, then you know a lot about it and you're really familiar with it. Other people have no idea. And I think in some ways, you're really similar. If anyone is in the design space, the interior design space, you are a celebrity. But in other worlds, some people may not be familiar with who you are and all that you do. You are a really multi-hyphenate creator, a designer. You do all kinds of projects in that space. You make furniture. You create skincare products. You more recently have launched a perfume collection, which we're going to talk about in depth a little bit later, or a fragrance collection. And you've done all other kinds of collaborations with brands. So I think there's so many things that we're really excited to talk to you about.
A really nice place to start might be going back to that visit to your home. And this was the first, we've seen your home like in magazines and websites, but Evan and I hadn't personally been there, and we were so inspired as you took us through and told us the story. And I think that it's a nice way to introduce a bit of your thinking and your perspective on design and creating space. So if you could just briefly tell us, for those who are listening that might not be familiar with your home, tell us about your home.
I live in a traditional Korean house that was built in 1917. And, like environment reflects who you are, and environments deeply influences you in many different ways. And by living in a traditional house that was built during the modern times, in a transitional time, it really made me think about where do we come from and where do we stand and where are we heading towards. So I am always constantly questioning myself of where I stand and where am I gonna create, design, and lead people towards to on the subject of time. So my house is sort of like an experimental platform and where I get my inspirational from. And also it's a huge, almost like a encyclopedia for me to do research on. So I feel very lucky. And, as a designer, I have this mission of translating tradition and local value to a contemporary and international language. And I was given this mission through this house. And I feel very lucky. As a designer, it makes a huge difference if you have a mission. And if you don't have a mission, I think it's definitely beneficial to be the one with the mission. And I feel very thankful to this house. And I do feel a great obligation that I take notice of the historical backgrounds and also to tell the narrative back to the people that I was influenced by.
Other editors on our team had visited you previously, and we've written about that. We'll put that link in the show notes. And that's one of the reasons why we said, hey, we've got to come visit you with our group if we can. One of the things we are talking about a lot in Korea is that, and this is a gross generalization, but that Koreans and Korean designers love a very tight design brief. They don't like loose, open-ended things. And we're trying to imagine, you see this house, and your house, when you say a house, it's a private house in a very old traditional neighborhood. So it's kind of like a townhouse because you are next to other people. It's not like it's not like Beverly Hills where you have a huge yard, right? So you're stacked up in between a bunch of other similar private houses up on a very small, steep, windy street. It's incredibly picturesque and beautiful. And it is not, no space is easy to design, but here you're entering a space that has multiple kind of buildings, lots of pretty small rooms. And we're just curious how you first arrived there and thought about it. You could have ripped all the rooms down and made them into a loft, right? But you decided to stick with what was there and work with it. And I think we'd just love to hear a little bit about that tight of a design brief that you walked into for yourself.
Definitely. I think as a designer, even though I'm an interior designer, I always take an approach, maybe like an architect who appreciates the memories of the site. And also, I really need to know the narratives and the history of what these kind of housings has a hold. And first, so research comes first. You need to know how the space has been composed and then how it functioned and what were the philosophies behind these and what were the aesthetic. And then you choose what you want to remain and what you want to bring it to the future. So it took a long time for me to do some research. and then start designing. I didn't want to really just create something new out of it. I knew that I wanted to create more like a research project than an interior design project. And I think that was a very different approach. There's so many design studios in Korea. I think there are two things that really makes my studio different is that like we have this mission to really deliver a tradition to a contemporary scene. And another thing is that we really think of design as a more as a humanities aspect to it. I always question myself, like, there are these three questions of humanities that they ask you, like, who am I? How am I gonna live? And how am I gonna die? So I always connect those questions to the practice that I do. So I make sure that I check the identities of the projects, and I make sure what kind of narratives do I want to deliver. And I always think about how I want these projects to be remained. So I think that's the approach I took when I was remodeling my Hanok. And it's still evolving within those three questions. And I think that's what makes people more interested in what I do.
And you can feel when you walk in that it is like a living thing. This isn't just something you designed and then walked away from. You live there. One of your spaces that you work at is also in that Hanok, and it definitely feels alive. It feels like it's a work in progress. And while it looks meticulous and beautiful and perfect in so many ways, it also still feels alive and like it's always in this state of movement, which is a pretty impressive achievement, I think.
And it does respect the history and the original architecture. And I appreciate that you were talking about also moving into the future, because there are elements of what you've done with that space that are much more forward looking. And, some of it might be about modernization to have a comfortable present experience, but some of it also feels like it's anticipating what might be next, what might be next for you personally, or what might be next in your work and in your output. So it is, I love that it is this research tool for you in so many ways. Teo, I'd love to hear some of your recent projects or some of the projects that you might be working on that you can talk about. When we were in Seoul, the Blue Bottle Studio hadn't opened yet, and we really wanted to see it, and we couldn't see it. But I know that's a recent project, and I think there's also something you're doing with the National Museum.
Yes, Blue Bottle Studio Seoul was a really fun project because we needed to remodel a Korean traditional house that was built in the early 1900s. And it was pretty much the same period when my house was built. So we were really focusing on doing research on like what were the transitions in that period, what were the changes that these houses were facing. And we also wanted to make sure that the new material, such as glass, steel, concrete, what were their roles and what were the energies that those materials were bringing into the housing. That were some answers that we needed to hear. So we literally created a book on what are the modern Hanoks and what were the changes that these architectures were facing. And we also wanted to make sure that are these housings cater to the modern day people in a efficient way, such as air conditioning and air circulation and good lighting. How do we hide that? How do we camouflage those technologies and make sure that it coexists with the the old aesthetic. So we came up with the systems on how to hide all the wires and pipings. And so that was the really important part of the project. And us and Blue Bottle, we are also considering to share some of the ideas that we have created through the project to the people who need to repair or install new things into the old architecture, not just Korean traditional ones, but if they need to fix a vernacular architecture in Vietnam or Kyoto, wooden houses, they do share a similar structure. So we're very happy to suggest that.
Is there a difference between just a regular Blue Bottle retail location and the Blue Bottle studio? Like, what is the difference
Yes,
for that?
definitely. Blue Bottle Studio is focused more on crafting the coffee, like the hand drips. So usually they would create almost like a tea ceremony experience. So limited guests, you need to make a reservation in order to enter, and they would serve course menu coffees in these housings. And it's not just a place for you to come in and drink coffee and leave, but it's really about sharing the research that they have done on brewing coffee and making coffee, and it's a platform to share all of that. So it will be a very special experience.
I'm curious about the contrast, the coffee culture and the cafe culture in South Korea is insane. And if people don't know anything about it, it's an incredible thing to research. There's so many cafes, they compete with each other in innovative pastries that are really photogenic so that you can share them on social media. And in a lot of ways, the social media is the more important output of it than the quality or taste of the pastries or the beverages. And this seems to be kind of the complete opposite, right? It's a equally intensive experience, but it's super minimal, and it's not about having Instagram friendly pastries with your coffee, right? This is really about savoring the space that you're in and the conversation with the people that you're with, or the solitude that you're bringing on your own to enjoy a handcrafted beverage,
Definitely.
right?
And also being part of this community who respects the craft of coffee and make sure that you support it. I think there's a lot of different meanings of enjoying Blue Bottle Studio, and I was just very happy to be part of it. And even with the space, I made sure that I put a lot of craft in it, such as a painting a wall with traditional lacquer techniques, and bringing in ceramics that was made in the in 5th century, and then we're installing that as a lighting fixture, and also having a traditional metalsmith and wood carving techniques being involved into the space. So it was so much fun to play with the narratives and introduce the narratives and techniques and make sure that people notice that all these old crafts are not just things in the past, but things that we can definitely utilize and things that could definitely inspire us.
I love that you just casually said bringing in 5th century ceramics to turn into light fixtures. That to me is really, I feel like so many places would look at a ceramic piece from the 5th century and put it on a pedestal and under a glass box and not want to alter it or not want to change its original use. And I think that you're taking this object and you're honoring it and you're celebrating it, but you're also changing it into something else. And to me, as very much an outsider, but we have spent a fair amount of time in Seoul and other parts of South Korea. To me, that feels somewhat uniquely Korean, right? This desire to look at the past and reference the past and take that insight and interpret it for the future and maybe change it for the future. but again, that's our outsider point of view. I'm really curious what how would you describe what is uniquely Korean or distinctly Korean from a design perspective?
No, I think you're definitely on point, and I'm very fascinated that you discovered that in such a short time. And I think through history, we as Koreans didn't really had the chance to enter the modernization with our own will after the Korean War. We were just busy surviving, and we had to have a lot of help from the Western outsider world. So I think Koreans now feel this urge, and I think Koreans do feel this great need that we need to reclaim what's ours and really understand what we had and really use tradition as a resource to build the future. I think it's a very important perspective that we need to have. Some people look at tradition as something as a past, but now Koreans are really looking tradition as a resource and make sure that we can use this and utilize it to create something beautiful and create something meaningful for the future. So I think it's a really positive change. And for the National Museum, especially the one in Gyeongju, which is the old capital of Korea, which I have designed, I actually took out all the ceramics that was made from 3 to 5 centuries out of the glass cabinet. I just really wanted to make an environment that people could connect to these old pieces, not just look at them as an old artifact within the glass case, but make connection with them by taking photos and looking at them closely and make them think that it was an ordinary object that was used in the past, but maybe we could create something similar where we could think about where we come from. So I actually changed the whole museum into a condition just like within the same condition as the glass box. So you're literally entering into the museum and you're entering into a glass box. So there are all these air filtration systems that filters are out our carbon dioxide, which is not good for the old objects. And we made sure that all the casings and all the platforms has the earthquake resistance built into it, and we created very simple bamboo guards that even a 6'2" guy comes in with the umbrella and tries to hit the object, they can't really reach it. So there were all these simple rules that we created to make sure these old artifacts are safe, but we wanted to really create a place where people can connect to these old objects. What's uniquely different and what's uniquely Korean is that there's this old saying, quote, in Korea. I'll just translate it in English. Yes. Truly beautiful things needs to be simple, yet not humble. And it should be splendid, yet not extravagant.
Can you say that in Korean too?
Yes, it's 거미 불루 화이 불치. It's like an attitude towards things, making sure that there is a balance in everything. And I think it really goes back to what you have said, that now we're really trying to find balance between the past and the present, and then make sure that we have the right amount of everything in our future. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge history, because when you look at yourself with the glasses of history, you now realize that you're part of something. So you want to know where you're from, and then you know where you're standing, and then you can decide where you want to go. And that gives us more options to choose from and more positive options. So I think it's really great that we're looking back to history and looking back to traditions and creating something new. And I think that's what makes Korea unique these days. Even food, fashion, K-pop, K-drama, K-movies, it all has reference to the past.
You mentioned art a lot, and I definitely want to come back to that because it's such a big part of your personal interest and very prevalent in your house and the way you integrate it into projects and then redesigning a museum. I'd love to talk about art a little bit when we come back from this quick break. Art is a big part of your life, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's also personally something that you're personally really interested in. It's not just a work thing, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how you think about art, both old and modern art? Clearly, you have thought a lot about how art lives in your house and how you integrate art in your projects. And you mentioned a great example of that in the Blue Bottle studio.
I love art because art gives me such a different perspective on how I should view the world. I'm always respectful and very thankful to artists who create something beautiful, but very contemporary at the same time. And being contemporary, I think it means that you have a very critical perspective on the world. In order to create art, good art, and also good design, I think you need to have an eye that could define an issue or a problem. And then you give a solution on that. Or not even a solution, just a suggestion. Or just to clarify what's going on with the world. And sometimes as a designer or someone who's not an artist, we really don't have a time to do that. The world's moving so fast and everything's going so fast around us. And sometimes we're put in this race. Sometimes you don't even realize that you are on this race, and then you don't acknowledge how the world's turning. But art gives me a chance to be away from all of that. So that's why I always want to surround myself with art that's been created by great minds and make sure that I think the similar way or get close to it. So collecting art for me and putting in art into projects that I do is a way for me to suggesting to people that we need to have a perspective and we need to have a critical thinking mind, and we need to not just enjoy space by sitting down and relaxing, which is good, but I want my space to be a platform where people could think in a deeper layer.
I know that some spaces have been created around art. I believe there's at least a couple in your own home where you intentionally had a work of art that you wanted to be in a specific place, and then you kind of renovated around that. I think for clients, similarly, clearly in a museum, you're doing the same thing. And art is also objects too, right? You collect historical things like beautiful old ceramics as well as modern art.
I just love mixing different time eras so much. I think there's a huge beauty in them. The juxtaposition of old art and contemporary art creates a beautiful narrative, such as putting ceramics from the ancient times and placing it with ufanlis. The line painting in my house was a choice for me to make sure that I constantly think about the history and also think about the difference of time. And sometimes I get too emotional, and sometimes I get too carried away with the importance of art, that sometimes I tend to erase the space and then only offer art to my clients. I will tell them, you don't need expensive furniture, you don't need that carpet there. Just buy a beautiful piece of art that would change your attitude towards the world, and then maybe that could be the starting point of something meaningful, and that would be a better space that I could suggest to. But some people agree, some people don't. But I just find that so amusing. Yes.
I love that you challenge your clients that way. And I love that you are not pushing to have your hand be the most present aesthetic in some of these cases. You're really encouraging living with art as a way to create space for someone. And clearly art is also inspiration for you. We're very fortunate to actually be together, and we're in New York right now. Have you had a chance to see any art while you're here? Have you had that, kind of inspiration moment?
Definitely. I mean, I'm here for only 5 days.
And this is your first time in New York in 10 years, right?
Yes, I think more than 10 years. I don't even remember when's the last time I was in New York. So I was so anxious to see everything. I was like, I need to go to the Noguchi Museum. I need to go to the Beacon. I have to visit the Met, Whitney, Guggenheim, and all the beautiful galleries in Chelsea.
That's your whole 5 days right there.
Yes.
Did you see the Jenny Holzer in Guggenheim?
Yes,
I know
I
you're a
did.
Jenny Holzer fan.
Yes. So I was just at the Guggenheim to see the Jenny Holzer show, and I just loved it so much. And how people were interacting was so fascinating to see, and how this whole museum turns into a huge, like a billboard of about this speech and words turning into art. It's so fascinating to see all of that. And even on the first day I arrived in New York, I had to just throw my suitcase in the hotel and run to the Noguchi Museum. And I was just, I kind of like felt like I was blessed with this energy. I was blessed by Noguchi's furniture, and stone sculptures, and I'm just so happy to be here. Yes.
And shout out to the Dia Beacon. Josh and I live in Beacon, so we actually saw on your Insta that you were visiting, and we were really excited about that. It's a great museum.
If I had to do one thing in New York, that was on my most priority list. And of course, I'm here for meetings with clients and talking about new projects in New York. But I had to visit the museums first.
Well, if you do have new projects, then maybe that means you'll be coming back more often, and we can introduce you to some more places. And one day it would be really satisfying, I think, to look at art together, because it's always interesting to us to see how individuals receive art and experience it, because it is incredibly subjective.
Oh, definitely. I love going to museums and galleries with friends who love to talk about art. It's really inspiring, and to exchange ideas, and that makes that experience time worthy.
I'd love to touch base on the pandemic. And as you said, you spent a lot of time in your house and working on things in your house. And when we were there, you shared that you loved sci-fi, and you set out to just start writing sci-fi stories. And that's turned into something else. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, during the pandemic, obviously all the borders were closed, so I couldn't travel. So I had some time on my own, and I always wanted to write sci-fi stories. So within that years, I was able to write very short stories, 6 different stories. I love sci-fi because it really gives you the momentum and the freedom to escape reality, and then but also look at the reality from almost like a third person's perspective. So you get a clear view of where you're standing, and then you could really talk about anything in sci-fi. So I've been touching bases on a lot of different things like gender issues and environmental issues, and where is this AI going to take us to, and the metaverse. So I had so much fun exploring and really going wild with my ideas. And then I just wanted to turn these small stories into an experience, something that's that has to do with their scents. So I had these ideas to turn these short stories into perfumes.
But this was way after you'd written them.
Yes,
Right? It wasn't
way
like
after.
while you were writing them, you're like, oh, this would be great.
No, yes, because when you think of it, of course, I mean, I would love to like create a space based on these novels and create music based on it, but like scent was like the first thing that I thought about. And so, but I don't know how to make sense, and I really don't know where to start from. So I put my novel into ChatGPT and asked, like, can you translate my stories into scents? And it actually did. It gave me like top notes, middle notes, base notes.
Really? It went into all that detail. That's amazing.
I mean, I had to ask in a deeper way different questions, like what would be the top note, what would be the middle note. So, and then I got some really incredible results. And then within those results, I came up with a friend, we used these formulas and created room scents. And I would create this room scents, and I have spray it, and then I have my friends read the novels while they're smelling the scent. And it was such a fun project for me. And then it became a brand. So I named it Sinang. Sinang means Si means time, and Nang means pouch. So it's time pouch. So it was a term that appeared in an old Korean novel. It was a time machine. So I named after that, and then I started distributing that, and it's been a really fun process.
Can you pick one of those 6 stories or 6 scents and just kind of describe it a little bit for us? What the story was and what the end scent came out to, how it's experienced?
Yes. So we have this scent named Artificial Nature, and it's a story about Earth being pretty much destroyed by the space trash, and Earth becomes not livable anymore with all this steel and plastic coming from the space. So people escape to the moon, and they start collecting this Earth trash and create artificial gardens. And so it's kind of like commenting on, like, if we go on like this, this dystopian future might come true. And then I created a perfume based on that, and it was really great because there were formulas that came that OpenAI shared with me. Was like moss and orange, and some other like exotic scents. And the other story that I love is called Roy Rubens. So I visit this female scientist. Her name is Vera Rubin. She's the first one to discover the dark materials in the universe. And I go and meet her in her lab, and we talk about, and I observe her, and we talk about the hardship that's going through her, and then we turned it into perfume as well. So
wait, what does Vera Rubin smell like?
Vera Rubin, so it's very feminine, but it's very dark, and it has violet in it and amber. So it's very fascinating how ChatGPT actually turns them into these different formulas. I don't know how it's doing it, but it was just a fun discovery for me as well.
And when someone purchases a scent, do they also get the novel?
Yes, I mean the short stories are on the website of the Sinang. Even the shorter ones are on the website, so you can read and actually choose your scent based on the stories, or you can just choose a scent and then discover the story afterwards. And like another story is the Savoy Apartment. It's based on the Chinese Cultural Revolution, about this a real apartment that exists in Shanghai. And I imagine like what would happen to this what would happen to this expats, and what happened to this Art Deco apartment. And then so I hope people could enjoy and learn more about it. Yes.
We talked earlier about having a really tight design brief, and unfortunately that applies to us too. We're very happy that you've given us a little bit of your time while you're here in New York. And right after this break, we'd like to talk about one more thing before we have to wind up. Teo, one of the things Josh and I think a lot about is the future. And on our studio side at Cool Hunting, we work with clients thinking about the future and ways to interpret it. How do you see design and all the things that you're passionate about as tools for solving some of the problems that we're likely to encounter over the next good chunk of time?
I think we do need to acknowledge that design is a tool, and design needs to give solutions. If you're not giving solutions and if you're not directing people in the right way, I don't think it should be considered as design. I mean, it's such a harsh statement, but I think it's true. So I think it connects to the previous conversation that we said. You need to have a critical eye, and you need to make sure that find places that needs improvement, and find places that needs to be fixed. And I think you need to be very active and work as a designer, create a voice, and make sure that you're creating positive change in those spaces, and make sure that you benefit to the history. And I think you need to acknowledge that things that we're creating right now is part of the history, and it will be documented, and it will be shared within times. So you need to be very careful on how you think and how you create new things.
You talked about how AI helped you translate a work of fiction that you created into a scent. Do you see other ways that you can bring AI into your creative practice?
Yes, I mean, in our studio, we already use AI in our research. We had to do some research on a luxury brand that's opening in Korea. So we were trying to find similarities between a Korean traditional noble house and with the Italian palazzos. And it took about a month for us to go through all the books and do research and find about 10 common things. And we wanted to create a space based on that. But after we wanted to use AI to just to see if we could get the same results, and it was giving us more accurate and more options that we couldn't think about. So I think it really, if we utilize it well, it will really help us to shorten the time on our research, and really give us a more abundant materials that we could use with.
I'm really happy that you first did the research through more traditional methodologies. You went through the books and then compared results with an AI, and that validated, what you found was it aligned with what you found, and then introduced more. And I think that this is just such an important part of how AI can be or should be used as a tool, as a collaborator in the creative process. We need to remain critical. We need to also do our own work as creatives. And I think that your example is such a great case study, or such a great role model for people who might be younger in their career and learning and thinking that they can do a lot more with AI and skip some of the more traditional methodologies. And this blend you've described sounds like a very healthy balance.
Yes, I mean, you have to read a lot in order to create good questions to ask AI. If you don't know anything, it could really give you the wrong answer. So I think there needs to be a balance of traditional way of reading and then utilizing AI in the same time.
One of the things that you pointed out in your, and this is kind of straying from AI, but still kind of thinking about future design. One of the things that you pointed out when we were in your home were some ancient ceramics, and you talked about scanning them, 3D scanning them, and then using that as a starting point for making something new. And I think that's another really interesting example of modern technology enabling a new creative process.
Yes, definitely. These old earthenwares, we do have the technology to scan all of them, and scanning means turning these real objects into data. And data provides us with so many different options to create. You can share the data and pass it on to people, and then you can play with the data using different tools, and then you can come up with something new for the 21st century. I decided to play with this data with modeling tools, and in the modeling tools, there are simple vocabularies such as rotate, scale, cut, distort. So I've been using these vocabularies to create new forms and new shapes and give them new functions. So these earthenwares used to be small cups, but I'm turning them into diffusers and also a vase and also small mirrors. So, and then 3D printing them using resin. Of course, you can use them just with resin, but I'm using this resin printed objects and using them as a mold to create a glass object. So by adding different layers and different methods, you can just definitely come up with something new and innovative. And I think it would be such a fun part to take.
I'm really excited to see how you're doing that. We saw sketches of things, but I think this starts a really interesting chapter, right? It's, to your point of what we've touched on a few times, it's looking back and honoring the past, and using those as kind of ingredients to create new things. So the idea of scanning a really old object and then thinking about different ways to manipulate its shape and create a new version of it using 3D printing or additive manufacturing, or even creating molds that can be used by hand. And that is super interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, these old objects were made by hand, and now it's being printed with computers. But there is still this connection, this conversation between two. I think it just makes so much interesting, and it's still and it also talks about the beautiful things that people created. I mean, I feel very fortunate that I've chosen to be an interior designer because I get to learn the beautiful things that people created throughout the history. I mean, that's such a noble thing to do. And like going to museums and going to galleries, that's all part of it. And I think that gives me chills all the time. Like in like 17th centuries, 1930s, like people had these thoughts and people created this beautiful object. And those were the things that made us where we stand now. And then it gives you throw out these questions like, what are you going to create? And how are you going to benefit the next generation after you? So I think it's really helpful to think that way.
I really hadn't thought of it before now, but thinking, people always ask us, aren't you afraid of AI? It's going to completely replace the editorial, process, and an AI can write something better than an editor or writer can. And as I think about it, you really can't have an AI really be your interior designer, right? It can give you really basic things like how to solve for a layout, but that whole element of putting things together based on your information, your taste, your personal insights and archives, and the client's desires, right, is something so unique. That's not something that AI can generate. Josh, I know you have a comment. You've got a sigh.
I think that it is totally possible to prompt an AI to create an interior design. I don't necessarily think that it will be as fantastic as a human designer. But I think that, I've certainly prompted AIs to create spaces, and
but saying, hey, design a spaceship that looks like Eames or whatever is different than walking into Teo's house and seeing the array of objects and books and art and furniture and light and colors and scale and drama and effect and putting those all together.
This is an interesting challenge, but I'm also like, I'm trying to read the expression on Teo's face. I feel like you've prompted an AI to create an interior design. Has that happened? Have you been satisfied with the results?
I mean, I do. I mean, I love the idea of AI because, in order for me to create, I need to read. I need to study. I need to see what Frank Gehry has done. But, I can't do all of that. I have limited time and I need to sleep. And it's impossible for me to read all the books, but AI can. It has all the information. And I think that really can help us to reach another level. And I'm so happy that I am living this era that could see that change. And I'm very excited where it will lead us to. But the thing is, we need to make sure that we're putting in the right data. Because AI needs to utilize the data, and we're feeding the data to AI. So I'm hoping that I could be a part of the researcher who could type the old books and feed it and turn those into data and feed it to the computer systems. It's sort of like scanning and changing it into data. I think I could be the middleman who would give the right information to utilize.
Yeah, we need an LLM for design.
Because there's a lot of false informations, on the web. So I just hope that AI will be much smarter, that it chooses facts over something that's false.
Teo, sadly, we have time for I think maybe one more thing. Is there something you want to share with us? Something you're excited about, thinking about, working on, dreaming about?
Well, I think I'm always inspired. Like, I'm just so happy that I'm in New York right now. I just can't wait to see more of what the city could offer. And I just can't wait to go back to Korea and utilize the things that I have seen here and learned here and create something meaningful with it.
That's great. I know that you spend a lot of time in LA, right? You have Eastern Edition, which is a retail location where you sell the furniture and furnishings that you make. You have another location in Seoul, and we'd love to have one in New York. Hint, hint, wink, wink. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I feel like we could go on and on for a couple more hours because there are so many little threads that we've just started to pull on. But so grateful for your time, Teo, and so grateful for your work. It is beautiful and it is important and it is interesting, and we're just really happy to have had this time with you.
I feel very honored to be here. Thank you.
Teo, thank you so much for making the time to be with us here today. We love your work. We think you're an amazing guy, and we're
inspired. We are inspired by you, Teo.
Exactly. So thanks again.
Listeners, let us know what you think of this episode by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast network of choice.
And thanks to Master Dynamic, the official headphone partner of the Surround Network, and to our great behind-the-scenes team, including our producers Rob Schulte and Rachel Senator at the Surround Podcast Network, which is part of Sandow Design Group.
To hear more podcasts like Design Tangents, head to surroundpodcasts.com, where you can hear shows like Clever, hosted by Amy Devers, or Ideas of Order, the California Closets podcast.